In the heart of a quiet town named Elmwood, there stood a dilapidated Victorian mansion that loomed over the landscape like a forgotten sentinel. Locals avoided it, whispering tales of the family that had once lived there, the Whittakers. It was said they had vanished one stormy night, leaving everything behind, as if they had simply ceased to exist. The house had become a source of fascination for thrill-seekers and ghost hunters. Each year, on the anniversary of the Whittakers' disappearance, a few brave souls would dare to enter. Among them was Clara, a college student with a penchant for the paranormal and a dream of uncovering the house's dark secrets. On a chilly October evening, Clara gathered her friends Matt, Jenna, and Leo, and together they approached Elmwood House, their flashlights cutting through the growing darkness. The air was thick with anticipation, and Clara felt a shiver run down her spine as they stepped through the creaking front door. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the scent of damp wood and something faintly floral that seemed to linger like a ghost of the past. Dust motes danced in their beams of light as they explored the foyer, where faded portraits of the Whittaker family stared down at them, their expressions frozen in time. "Look at this," Leo said, pointing to a staircase that spiraled into shadow. "They say the last time anyone saw them, they were headed upstairs." "Let's check it out," Matt urged, his voice a mix of bravado and nerves. Clara hesitated but felt an irresistible pull toward the unknown. They climbed the stairs, each step groaning underfoot, as if the house itself was protesting their intrusion. At the top, they found a long hallway lined with doors. One door at the end stood ajar, a flickering light spilling into the corridor. Clara felt a cold breeze waft past her, chilling her to the bone. "Should we go in?" Jenna asked, glancing at Clara. "Absolutely," Clara replied, her heart racing with both fear and excitement. They moved toward the door, peering inside. The room was vast and filled with antique furniture draped in white sheets, like forgotten souls. In the center stood an ornate mirror, its surface covered in a layer of dust, reflecting the room in distorted shapes. But it was the flickering light that drew their attention. It emanated from an old lantern on the mantelpiece, casting dancing shadows across the walls. "Who lit that?" Matt asked, his voice low, glancing back at the others. "I don't know," Clara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it looks like it's been here for years." As they stepped further into the room, Clara felt a strange energy pulsating in the air. The whispers began soft at first, like rustling leaves, but growing louder, as if a conversation was taking place just out of earshot. She turned to the others, their faces reflecting the same mix of curiosity and dread. "Do you hear that?" Clara asked. Before anyone could respond, the mirror suddenly shimmered, and the shadows in the room deepened. In the reflection, Clara saw them, the Whittakers. They appeared as ghostly figures, their faces etched with despair, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and longing. Clara's breath caught in her throat. "They're trying to tell us something," she gasped, pointing at the mirror. The group leaned closer, captivated by the vision before them. The Whittakers' mouths moved, but no sound came through. Clara could feel a desperate energy flowing from the mirror, pulling her toward it. Then, the temperature dropped sharply, and the whispers intensified, transforming into panicked cries. The figure of the mother raised her arms, as if pleading for help, while the father clutched a small child to his chest, his eyes darting around as if he could see something they couldn't. "What do you want?" Clara shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The mirror rippled, and suddenly, Clara felt a force pushing her forward, her body moving against her will. She stumbled, reaching out to steady herself, and as her fingers brushed against the glass, a surge of energy shot through her, like a jolt of electricity. Images flooded her mind, scenes of the Whittakers last night alive. She saw them gathered around the dinner table, laughter filling the air. Then the atmosphere shifted. The laughter turned to panic as shadows crept in through the windows, dark tendrils snaking around the house, whispering in voices that chilled Clara's soul. "They never left," Clara murmured, realization dawning on her. Just then, the lantern flickered violently, casting eerie shadows that seemed to reach for them. Clara yanked her hand away from the mirror, stumbling backward as the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. "Run!" Jenna screamed, pulling Clara away just as the shadows surged toward them, swirling like a storm. They raced back down the hallway, the whispers chasing them, echoing their names in chilling tones. Clara could feel the weight of the house pressing down on them, the air thick with despair. As they reached the front door, Clara dared a glance back. In the mirror, the Whittakers stood frozen, their faces a mixture of sorrow and relief. "Help us?" She thought she heard them whisper one last time, before the door slammed shut behind them, cutting off the cacophony of voices. Outside, the night air felt alive with electricity. They collapsed onto the grass, panting, the moonlight bathing them in a silvery glow. "What just happened?" Leo gasped, his face pale. "The Whittakers, they're trapped," Clara said, still shaking from the experience. "We have to help them. They need to be freed." As they sat in stunned silence, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves above them, carrying faint echoes of laughter and cries into the night. The house loomed behind them, silent once more, but Clara knew it was far from over. "Next time," Clara whispered, a mix of determination and dread filling her heart. "Next time, we'll come back." And as the shadows deepened, the whispers of Elmwood House lingered in the air, a haunting reminder that some stories were meant to be uncovered, even if they led you into the heart of darkness. As Clara and her friends sat in the cool night air, the weight of what they had experienced pressed down on them. The whispers of the Whittakers echoed faintly in their minds, and the chilling aura of the house loomed behind them like a specter, watching, waiting. "Next time we go back," Clara said, her voice steadying with newfound resolve. "We need to be prepared. We need to understand what happened to them." "Are you serious?" Jenna exclaimed, her eyes wide with disbelief. "They were trapped. We barely escaped. What if we can't get out again?" Matt nodded, looking toward the ominous silhouette of Elmwood House. "I agree with Jenna. It's too dangerous. What if that thing in the mirror decides to claim us, too?" Clara took a deep breath, grounding herself in the cool night air. "But we can't just leave them. They deserve to be freed. They're reaching out for help, and we can't ignore that." The group fell silent, the sounds of the night filling the void. The rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, and the whispering wind created a haunting symphony that wrapped around them. Each of them was lost in thought, contemplating the risk that lay ahead. Finally, Leo broke the silence. "If we're going back, we need a plan. We can't just rush in like last time." Clara nodded, appreciating Leo's practicality. "We'll gather supplies, flashlights, a video camera, anything we can use to document what we find. And we'll need to figure out more about the Whittakers. Maybe there are records in the town archives, or someone who remembers them." The prospect of research gave Clara a spark of hope. With a clearer understanding of the family's story, perhaps they could find a way to help them escape the grip of Elmwood House. "All right," Jenna sighed, still hesitant. "But we do this together. No one goes off on their own." As the group began to head back toward town, the tension from their previous encounter lingered in the air. Clara stole a glance over her shoulder at the house, its dark windows like empty eyes staring back at her. She felt an unshakable sense that something was watching, waiting for their return. The next day, Clara led her friends to the local library, a quaint building with weathered bricks and tall windows that had witnessed generations come and go. Inside, they combed through dusty archives and old newspapers, piecing together the Whittaker family's tragic history. They learned that the family had been well-liked, known for hosting gatherings and charity events. But as time went on, whispers began to circulate about strange happenings at Elmwood House. Neighbors reported flickering lights and shadowy figures moving behind the curtains. And then, one stormy night, the family vanished without a trace. Clara's heart raced as she read the last article, detailing the search for the Whittakers. "They searched for weeks," she said, turning the page with trembling fingers. "But nothing was ever found. It's like they just disappeared." "Maybe they didn't leave," Leo murmured, leaning over Clara's shoulder. "Maybe they're still there, trapped." As they dug deeper, Clara felt a growing urgency. The more they uncovered, the more it felt like a puzzle that was begging to be solved. She began to sketch out a plan, determining which items they would take and how they would navigate the house this time. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. That evening, armed with their newfound knowledge, Clara and her friends returned to Elmwood House. The air felt heavier, thick with anticipation as they approached the front door, which now appeared to loom larger, almost swallowing the light from their flashlights. "Okay, we stick together this time," Jenna said, her voice steady but anxious. "No wandering off." With a nod of agreement, they stepped inside, the familiar scent of damp wood greeting them. The atmosphere felt charged, as if the house itself recognized their presence. Clara led the way to the parlor, her heart pounding in sync with the whispers that danced around them. As they entered the room, the lantern flickered to life again, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Clara glanced at the mirror, its surface now dark and unreflective, like a portal to another realm. "Do you think they're waiting for us?" Matt whispered, his voice barely audible over the rustling whispers. "Only one way to find out," Clara replied, determination surging within her. She reached into her backpack and pulled out the video camera, setting it to record. "Let's document everything," she said, her voice steady. "We need to capture whatever happens tonight." They gathered around the mirror, and Clara took a deep breath. "If you can hear us, please show yourselves. We want to help." The air thickened, and for a moment, the room fell silent. Then, as if answering her plea, the mirror rippled, and the figures of the Whittakers appeared once more. This time, their faces were clearer, the expressions a mixture of desperation and hope. "Help us," the mother mouthed, her eyes pleading. The father stood protectively beside her, the child clinging to his leg, their forms flickering like candle flames. Clara felt a surge of empathy. "We're here for you. We want to help you escape this place." Suddenly, the shadows in the room swirled violently, and the temperature dropped sharply. The Whittakers' faces twisted in anguish, and Clara could feel their pain resonating through the air. The laughter returned, louder and more menacing, drowning out her words. "Get out!" Jenna cried, backing away as the shadows surged toward them, threatening to engulf them. "Hold hands!" Clara shouted, grabbing hold of her friends. "We need to stay together." As they formed a circle, Clara focused on the mirror, willing the Whittakers to understand. "You don't have to be afraid. We can break this curse together." But the laughter grew louder, drowning out their pleas. The shadows coiled around them, and Clara felt an overwhelming sense of despair seep into her bones. It was as if the house itself was alive, feeding off their fear. "Stay with us," the whispers chanted, echoing through the room. In that moment of desperation, Clara remembered the stories, the love that had once filled the house. She squeezed her friend's hands tighter and began to speak from her heart. "We believe in you. You can find peace. You don't have to be trapped here." The shadows hesitated, and Clara felt a shift in the atmosphere. The laughter softened, transforming into a haunting melody that resonated with the Whittakers' sorrow. They looked at each other, their expressions shifting from despair to something more hopeful. "Together," Clara urged, her voice rising above the chaos. "We can do this together." The Whittakers' figures flickered, and Clara felt a surge of warmth flow through her as they reached toward the mirror, their hands outstretched. But just as the light began to brighten, the shadows lunged forward, a final, desperate attempt to keep them trapped. Clara's heart raced as she felt the cold tendrils wrap around her, pulling her back. "Hold on," Leo shouted, pulling them closer. "We can't let go." As they fought against the shadows, Clara focused on the love that had once filled Elmwood House, the laughter, the family gatherings, the memories that lingered like echoes. In that moment, she poured every ounce of her energy into the connection they had formed, believing that love was stronger than fear. The mirror shimmered violently, and Clara felt the energy shift. The whispers turned into cries of both despair and hope as the figures of the Whittakers surged forward, their hands breaking through the barrier of shadows. "Help us!" they cried, their voices intertwining with the others, merging into a single plea. With one last push, Clara shouted, "You can be free!" In an explosion of light, the shadows erupted, dissolving into 1,000 tiny sparks that filled the room with warmth. The figures of the Whittakers burst forth from the mirror, their faces illuminated with relief as they stepped into the light, finally breaking free from their torment. As the shadows dissipated, the laughter transformed into joyous cries. The room flooded with light, enveloping Clara and her friends in a cocoon of warmth. In that moment, Clara felt a profound sense of peace wash over her. The Whittakers smiled, their faces radiant, and Clara knew they were finally free. But just as quickly, the light began to fade, and Clara found herself back in the parlor, breathless and bewildered. The mirror stood still, reflecting only their wide-eyed faces. "Did that just happen?" Jenna gasped, her voice trembling with disbelief. "We need to get out," Clara said, glancing back at the fading glow. But as they turned to leave, a sudden coldness swept through the room, and the whispers returned soft and insistent, lingering in the corners of their minds. "Wait," a voice echoed, chilling them to the core. "We're not done yet." And with that, the door slammed shut behind them, sealing their fate within the haunted walls of Elmwood House. The shadows deepened, and the laughter returned, wrapping around them like a suffocating blanket as they realized the true extent of the darkness they had awakened. Panic surged through Clara and her friends as the door slammed shut, echoing like a thunderclap in the suddenly oppressive silence. The air thickened, a palpable sense of dread enveloping them. Clara's heart raced as she grasped the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Let us out," Jenna cried, pounding on the door, her voice filled with desperation. "We have to find another way," Matt shouted, scanning the room for any means of escape. But the walls felt like they were closing in, the shadows stretching and twisting as if they had a life of their own. "Remember what the Whittakers said," Clara urged, trying to hold on to the courage that had brought them this far. "They need our help to find peace. We can't leave until we understand what they meant." Suddenly, the lantern on the mantel flickered to life, casting a soft glow that cut through the darkness. The whispers rose again, now a chorus of pleading voices, swirling around them like a tempest. "Stay with us." Clara felt a cold chill creeping up her spine, but she steadied herself. "If you need us to stay, show us how to help." The shadows seemed to hesitate, swirling uncertainly. Clara's breath quickened as the air shimmered, and she focused on the mirror. Its surface glinted as if it were alive, and she stepped closer, drawn to its reflection. "Help us. Remember," the voice echoed softly, resonating in her mind. In that moment, Clara understood. They needed to confront not just the Whittakers' past, but the darkness that had invaded their lives. She took a deep breath and turned to her friends. "We have to recreate that night, the night they disappeared. Maybe if we understand what happened, we can set them free." "What do you mean?" Leo asked, fear in his eyes. "Think about it," Clara replied. "We saw them at the dinner table. Let's set the scene. If we can bring back the memories, we can break the hold of the shadows." With a mix of determination and dread, they gathered around the lantern, Clara leading the way. They found old dishes and cutlery scattered around the room and arranged them on a dusty table in the center of the parlor. As they worked, the whispers intensified, rising to a fever pitch, and shadows danced wildly across the walls. Clara lit a candle, its flame flickering nervously, and placed it in the center of the table. "All right, let's remember," she said. "Let's think about the warmth, the laughter. We have to focus on that." As they sat around the table, Clara began to speak. "Imagine the Whittakers at their happiest. The family gatherings. The joy of being together." Slowly, the shadows began to recede, drawn to the light they were creating. The whispers softened, transforming from desperate cries into a soothing hum. "Do you remember the stories?" Jenna chimed in, her voice trembling but filled with hope. "The holidays, the laughter. They loved each other so much." Together, Clara urged, squeezing her friend's hands tighter. "We can do this." As they closed their eyes and focused on the memories of love and togetherness, the room filled with warmth. The shadows shrank, and the air lightened, vibrating with energy. Clara felt a surge of emotion as she envisioned the Whittakers, their laughter, their joy, and the love that had once filled Elmwood House. Suddenly, the mirror shimmered violently, and the figures of the Whittakers appeared once more. This time, they looked vibrant and full of life, their eyes glimmering with hope. "Thank you," the mother whispered, her voice breaking through the air like a gentle breeze. "You've remembered for us." With every ounce of belief they could muster, Clara and her friends urged the family forward. "You don't have to be trapped anymore. You can find peace." The room burst into brilliant light, and the lantern flared, illuminating every corner of the parlor. The Whittakers reached toward the mirror, their faces filled with a mix of sorrow and gratitude. But just as they began to step forward, the shadows writhed in fury, battling against the light. "No!" they cried in a chorus of rage. "You cannot leave." Clara felt a surge of fear, but she refused to let it control her. "You can't keep them here. They deserve to be free." The shadows lunged at them, swirling like a storm, but Clara and her friends stood firm, holding hands tightly. They focused on the love they felt for each other, the bond that had brought them together. "We won't let you take them," Clara shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The light from the lantern intensified, illuminating the entire room as the Whittakers began to break through the barrier of shadows. "We are more than fear," Clara cried. "We are love." With a final, desperate push, the Whittakers surged forward, their figures breaking free from the mirror's grasp. The shadows roared in defiance, but the light enveloped them, illuminating the room in a breathtaking glow. As the Whittakers stepped into the light, their faces transformed into serene expressions of peace. They turned to Clara and her friends, gratitude shining in their eyes. "Thank you," they whispered, their voices now soft and harmonious. In an explosion of light, the shadows imploded, dissipating into nothingness. The house shook, and for a moment, it felt as if the very foundations of Elmwood House were crumbling. But as the light washed over them, Clara felt the weight of despair lift, replaced by an overwhelming sense of relief. And then, just like that, it was over. The house fell silent, the shadows gone, and the mirror lay still, reflecting only the empty room. Clara and her friends stood there, breathless and disoriented. The oppressive atmosphere was replaced by a serene stillness, a sense of completion. "We did it," Jenna whispered, her voice filled with awe. As they stepped outside into the cool night air, Clara looked back at Elmwood House. It stood quietly, no longer a menacing figure but a relic of a story now told, a tragedy transformed into hope. The Whittakers were free, and so was the house. The memories would linger, but now they were filled with light instead of darkness. "Let's make sure they're never forgotten," Clara said, a smile spreading across her face as she turned to her friends. "They deserve to be remembered for the love they shared." And as they walked away from the house, the moon shone brightly above them, illuminating their path with a gentle glow, a promise that love could conquer even the deepest shadows. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.